I think a national ban on Airbnbs is coming. People all over are saying Airbnbs are driving up rent and the cost of housing, and politicians are starting to take notice. Now, Airbnb and VRBO are starting to take a lot of heat, and some cities have already put outright bans in place. Now, everybody loves Airbnb until one moves right next door. And Florida, well, we're right in the middle of all of this. With a ton of tourists and new residents moving in, Florida is one of the biggest Airbnb markets out there. But with rents climbing and a shortage of housing, places like Miami and Orlando are starting to rethink if Airbnb is actually helping or hurting. A national ban could seriously shake things up for this state, changing the economy and the rental market for locals and investors. So are Airbnbs really to blame for the housing shortage? Should they be banned? I say no, but I'm a real estate investor. I'll give you the facts on both sides, and I'll be honest, after watching this, you might want to ban them too. Let's jump in. So platforms like Airbnb and VRBO are facing the biggest criticism when it comes to vacation rentals. And some cities are actually trying to enact bans on Airbnbs because they think that might curb rent increases. This is all tied to the housing affordability crisis, and it seems like people need somebody to blame. And VRBO and Airbnb, unfortunately, it's you. Now, Irvine, California is a city of 300,000 residents, and they actually banned Airbnb 6 years ago. And the mayor is saying that the residents are loving it. Of course, that's just the mayor's point of view. So what's actually happened after the ban? They've seen a slight decrease in rental prices, but housing prices still remain high despite the ban. Now, New Orleans went through a similar situation, and they put a lot of new rules in place. If you're gonna run a short-term rental, you gotta live in the residence you're renting out. They also limited Airbnbs to 1 per square block. And you can't list your property on the Airbnb website without a city permit number. And you better believe the city polices that site. This caused a lot of people that didn't have permits to have to sell their properties, some of them for a loss. In Telluride, Colorado, they placed heavy restrictions on Airbnbs. So the problem is they rely heavily on tourists, and this reduced the available lodging. So tourists quit coming because there was no place to stay. So that means they weren't spending money. So local restaurants, shops, and other businesses saw a massive decline in sales. That made Telluride reverse course and come up with a compromise. And the revenue was directed towards affordable housing initiatives. This approach let them maintain some control over their short-term rental market while also generating funds to support the local housing market. Their whole goal was to put a balance between tourism and affordability. Also, don't forget, hotels have been fighting hard against Airbnbs for years. The American Hotel and Lodging Association spent $1.1 million on federal lobbying efforts in 2022 to get short-term rental platforms like Airbnb regulated. And they're getting major contributions from large hotel chains. Marriott spent $750,000 lobbying in 2022 to stop Airbnb and impose regulations. Now in 2024, they won't post exactly how much money they've spent lobbying, but they're pushing hard for stricter zoning laws and new taxes to make it harder to turn a profit for Airbnb owners. But is Airbnb the real problem? A study found that a 1% increase in Airbnb listings leads to only a 0.018% rise in rent prices and a 0.026% increase in housing prices. And as of 2024, the US has 147 million housing units. And out of those, only 2.25 million are active Airbnb listings. This shows that Airbnbs make up a small fraction of the overall supply and have limited influence on national rent and home prices. So what are the real factors driving up housing costs? Number one, it's housing supply shortage. Builders just have not been building since the crash in 2008. Number two is increased construction costs. The rising material, labor, and land costs have pushed developers to raise rents. Number three is inflation, and this is one of the main drivers. This raises the cost of living, including housing. Plumbing supplies go up, labor goes up, and rent goes up. Just look at how much the cost of food has increased in the past 4 years. That's inflation. Number four is investment demand, and I can't leave this one off. Yes, when investors do buy properties, it takes those off the market and it reduces the available homes for purchase. Number five is property taxes and maintenance costs. I remember when a tenant used to leave one of our apartment buildings, it would cost us $400 to get it ready for the next tenant. Now it costs us at a minimum $800. And also taxes have gone through the roof. We pay about $50,000 a year across all our properties just in property taxes. And number 6, let's face it, the local economy and jobs. If your area is doing well, people want to move there, and that's going to drive up demand, which is going to increase the cost of housing and rents. So if you're still thinking about buying an Airbnb, it's important to know your local laws. I live in the city of St. Petersburg, Florida, and here you have to register your Airbnb with the city. They also only allow 30-day rentals. Now you can rent for less than 30 days, but they only allow it 3 times a year. Here's another thing. There is a local woman here in St. Petersburg who targets Airbnb owners that she feels is breaking the law. To date, she says she's reported over 250 owners to the city. Now, like I said, I own apartment buildings, and I've heard for years all these people are making a ton of money with Airbnbs. But I've never pulled the trigger because I'm a little nervous that these things are going to be banned across the country. All it takes is for some politicians to get upset, change the laws, and the next thing you know, you're screwed. The other thing I like is if you move next to my apartment building, you know exactly what you're getting when you move there. But when any house in any neighborhood has the potential to turn into an Airbnb, you can't control that. So it all comes down to we need more housing. And mom and pop landlords, those that own only a few rental properties, own around 38% of all houses in the United States. That's a huge number, and many of these owners are old, tired landlords that are ready to get out of business. I think the government should incentivize these people to sell those homes. They could do it by waiving the capital gains tax on the properties when they sell them. Now imagine the impact. A lot of these owners would jump at the chance to sell, flooding the market with a bunch of new available homes to buy. If you're thinking about buying an Airbnb to rent out, make sure you know the local government's rules in the city that you're buying in. And always avoid cities that make it hard on Airbnb owners. And things are not getting any easier for short-term rentals. So if you already own one, you might want to think about an exit strategy in case a ban does go into effect. Now, Florida just had a new law hit Governor Ron DeSantis' desk about Airbnbs. And in this next video, I'll break down exactly what it means for an Airbnb owner. Let me know if you agree with what the governor did, because this one gets a lot of people upset. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you there.